with Fabrizio Romano, because Fabrizio Romano tweeted this evening that Seb, that Agnelli and the entire Juventus board are resigning.
Yeah, that also includes Pavel Nedved. It's strange. We don't actually have any facts or any reason why this has happened, but this is hugely significant. Obviously, Juventus have been embattled throughout the season because of what's happened on the pitch. Also, financial issues at the club, questions about Max Allegri's future at Juventus. Performances haven't been very good. And Fabrizio Romano, as you say, Joe, is reporting that they are both gone. So there's going to be there's a promise of a major restructuring imminently. A new board, a new direction. Strange one. Obviously, most people know Agnelli from his role in the Super League. He's kind of like not head villain of the Super League, but he was a...
He was backup to Florentino Perez, and he spoke... The word I was going to use was eloquently, but I fundamentally disagree with what he was saying. He spoke a lot of words about why the Super League was a good idea, and he cited children's interest in Fortnite and Call of Duty as a reason for why the Super League would exist. My disagreement with that was he never quite understood that the versions of Fortnite and Call of Duty that under 20-year-olds were playing have a free-to-play model.
Yeah.
And I just believe the Super League, as he portrayed it, failed because he was an individual that did not understand that he was in the content business as well as the footballing business.
That's an interesting take. Well, you also had an interesting take, John, which was to say that you can't believe Allegri has out-survived the board, given how complicated the footballing matters at Juventus are right now.
Yeah, I mean, the football at Juventus has been bad this season. Like, they've crept up a little bit in the last few games before the break for the World Cup, but there was a lot of surprise that he hadn't gone earlier. Obviously, there are questions about the finances at Juventus, whether or not they can afford to get rid of Allegri. That's what the speculations are. But the whole, I think, trajectory of the last few years, maybe even the last decade or so of Juventus has been pretty much a downward spiral in a lot of respects. And we remember the time when Antonio Conte was there. We remember the time when Allegri was there the first time. And they very much seemed on an upward trajectory, certainly in terms of the domestic leagues. But there was always this paranoia about not being able to win the Champions League. And so they went through a little bit of a soul search, and they changed things up, and they brought in a couple of more interesting managers. So they brought in Maurizio Sarri, they brought in Andrea Pirlo, and the idea was that they needed modern managers who were going to be able to bring them the Champions League. And we've talked about this in one of the videos on IRL. We did a long history of this. And they essentially lost their nerve, I think. So they
all went weird when they changed the badge to that J, which I'm a fan of. But there was definitely a phase where Juventus were a very well-run club, and then I believe they lost one of their executives who went over to Inter Milan. His name currently escapes me, and then that sort of began Inter Milan's rejuvenation and climb up, and they stopped being a year zero football club. And I've said this a couple of times on Twitter, where a lot of the time Juventus make decisions, and you almost want someone from an improv class there to go, and then what?
You know what's really interesting about that is also because like the sort of initial era of dominance, the kind of that success that John just referenced, like you associate with Antonio Conte, but you remember that the Antonio Conte who delivered that was not the Antonio Conte that we know today, not the guy that's won titles in several titles in Italy, of course, but in England as well. Didn't have that reputation, so it was a little bit of a lunge. In it also, like it was built on, I mean, not solely, but there's some really good transfer decisions, not least Andrea Pirlo on a free transfer, Arturo Vidal coming in, like Paul Pogba, of course, was like, when you look back on that kind of thing now on Transfermarkt, you think, Paul Pogba, that's a good deal. Paul Pogba had no reputation whatsoever, really, other than being someone who was frustrated at not playing for Manchester United and Alex Ferguson. I am adjusting my mic. Thank you, Joe Devine. And so all of these good decisions sort of led to that era. And then over time, if you look back at some of the decisions now, it's exactly as Carl says. There's not an awful lot of long-term planning involved in them, I don't think.
I think it's the, and forgive me, Tifo, viewer, listener, I'm going to compare things to professional wrestling. But there's often this phrase in professional wrestling that essentially become a mark for yourself, that in your rise to the top, you begin to believe your own myth, and you begin to believe your own exceptionalism. And Juventus's climb came from years of running around in the wilderness. I remember 2010, where you were quite happy to just get into the Europa League and whatnot. And they made a lot of very, very good decisions in a row for about 5 or 6 years. And they made these decisions because they looked for market inefficiencies and they were thinking long term. And they had a very, very good manager. And somewhere along the way, and I will probably point to one of those Champions League defeats to Barcelona or Real Madrid, they stopped making good decisions, or they stopped understanding why they made good decisions and started believing we make good decisions because we're Juventus. And any decision Juventus makes is correct, instead of going, we need to stop thinking like the other top teams in Italy and need to outsmart them. And if you believe yourself institutionally exceptional, I don't care if you're a government, I don't care if you're a football team, I don't care if you're a university, and you
podcast host?
or a podcast host, or a professional wrestler, or indeed a podcast guest, if you start thinking, oh, well, I'm going to be fantastic because I'm me, essentially that exception has will rot you from the inside out. You go from a position where you start off doing a job and you work really, really hard because you want the position. And then you get to a point where you get that position and you think the position will protect you and insulate you from future bad decisions. And this is how you end up with this weird state of Juventus.
Do you think I really need to
Tell me to.
we need to get out of here and make some changes.
Do you think the standard of Serie A during those years was complicit in this as well, some of those inefficiencies? Because if you don't, like, you know the cliche about you need 2 really good goalkeepers at any club, right? And if you have one who's much, much better than the other, over time, you see a kind of a long-term decline and a complacency. I always felt it's kind of the same in football leagues. If you have one team who dominate a league and are virtually guaranteed a title to the point where they concentrate all their resources on European success, eventually, like kind of internal scrutiny on decisions and kind of long-term strategy is the thing that suffers.
I think it's a combination of a number of factors. I definitely think there was a point where Serie A, I mean, there was always long-term articles of why couldn't Serie A compete in the Champions League? What does Serie A need to do to compete and whatnot? And definitely Juventus, to use the English, took their eye off the ball a bit.
Yeah.
If you look at Massimo's got a fantastic essay in Players Tribune where he describes the Champions League final against Real Madrid. And he said it was his life's ambition. He planned that meticulously, planned that final. And he describes just this incredibly mortifying feeling watching Cristiano Ronaldo go supernova in that game. And just going, you can't stop that. You cannot legislate for when one of the best players in the world decides, I'm going to take over. And I think the good plans and the long-term sensible planning of Juventus coming undone against superb individuals that you can't necessarily legislate for in a collective. And when that happens, you essentially, go a bit supervillain. Oh, no, that effing Kryptonian, if you're Lex Luthor or whatever. I need to find a way to tear him down, which is why Juventus lost their way a bit, because they went from thinking of a smart, sensible collective marketing to, should we just buy him?
Yeah.
And that accelerates a malaise. I'm not saying Ronaldo's the problem, but I'm saying the signing of Cristiano Ronaldo at that point in time probably exacerbates a number of issues that they weren't properly prepared for.
Yeah, okay.
If you liked today's video, please consider subscribing to the channel. And if you did like it, you might be interested in How to Watch Football, Tifo's illustrated book. It's 52 rules for understanding the beautiful game on and off the pitch, and it is the perfect holiday gift. How to Watch Football is out now in stores and online. See the link in the description to find out more, and thank you for watching today's video.